Nigel Farage, he's denying any wrongdoing, but the anti-racism protesters and activists, they've showed their feelings over the weekend. I was there when they marched outside Reform's headquarters on Victoria Street. So they're not very happy. Which social media platforms do you think are currently threatening clear factual information, which is what the public need at a crucial time? And where do you actually see it even going next?
I think in the case of the UK riots, uh, which started on around July 30th, just after the killing of three children and the serious wounding of children and adults at a dance class near Liverpool, and lasted for more than a week. If you ask about their connection with certain UK politicians, in particular the Reform Party leader Nigel Farage, and with certain UK outlets, national TV stations amongst them, I think it's best to simply start from the facts, because that way you cut through the misinformation, you cut through the disinformation, which were a large factor in spurring those riots. And if you start with those facts, you have this mass killing, this stabbing on July 29th of these children uh, and of at least two adults who were running the class. And within hours, there was, particularly on Elon Musk X, formerly Twitter, there was this rampant spread of disinformation that said, and it was a name like Ali al Hadith or something like that, right? But it was clearly a name which was meant to conjure up images of someone who was an Arab or someone who was Muslim. Uh, that person didn't exist. What had happened is that, and we know this is on the public record, is that a woman up in Northwest England, a woman in her 50s, mother of two, interest in cooking, but also a conspiracy theorist, a COVID denier, for example. She had put that name out there on Twitter, X. She says now that she got it from someone else, and police have actually are trying to get her to reveal that name. She's under threat of prosecution for what she's done. When she put that out there, the name was picked up by Tommy Robinson. Now, Tommy Robinson is a white supremacist, longtime white supremacist. He has served time in prison for hate speech directed at ethnic, racial, and religious minorities. He, in fact, is currently in Cyprus. When this all happened, he was on the run from a court hearing for which he might be prosecuted over a defamation case where he allegedly defamed a Syrian refugee. Tommy Robinson from Cyprus, and he's very, very active on social media, including on X, simply flooded his timeline, including putting this name out there. Hours after that, what you had was Nigel Farage filming a piece to camera. This was a personal piece for his X timeline, where he said, "What are they hiding? What are they hiding from us? You know, the police say this is a non-terrorism related incident, but what are they hiding?" Just as, you know, we had other incidents such as the stabbing of a colonel in Kent, and the police said that was not terror related. What are they hiding? And what Farage was doing, without actually repeating that name that was out there on the internet, was putting the seed out there in people's minds, which was that the police knew that someone who was different from us, someone who was a threat, had carried out this horrible mass murder. And the police were covering this up because they did not want to call it what it was, terrorism by someone who quite possibly could be of a different background. Now, at this point, and this has all happened from July 29th into July 30th, at this point, the police are not revealing the name of the suspect who has carried out this mass murder for the reason that he is 17 years old. In cases, and I know this because my grandfather was in law enforcement, I've got many friends who are in law enforcement. When you have a case which involves a juvenile, it is particularly sensitive in terms of the information that you release. And so the police were not going to the press and were not revealing this at that point for a very, very good reason. But of course, it was being manipulated. And it's now being manipulated by people like Tommy Robinson and by Nigel Farage. And importantly, Farage films his piece to camera after the first riots are starting up in Southport, which of course is where the stabbing occurred. So by the time he comes on camera on July 31st, he knows full well what is happening out there. Now, of course, when Farage says this, he happens to have a prime time weeknight 1 hour show on a major UK national channel. So that channel then, of course, not only features what he's saying, but they have other presenters who are doing so as well. There is a second TV channel, which is very supportive of Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, and they do the same thing. And what we have is that these far right gatherings, who are only a few hundred people, they were no more than 300 to 400 in any single incident. But as you see them spread from Southport to Hull to Sunderland to Liverpool, down in the southwest in Bristol, across to Belfast in Northern Ireland, you have a combination of two things. One of which I've grown up with ever since I was a journalist at the age of 16. If it bleeds, it leads. That means these far right gangs aren't a large number. In fact, they will later be outnumbered by those who are protesting against the riots, protesting against racism, protesting against Islamophobia. But because they have the visuals of setting wheelie bins on fire, threatening a hotel for asylum seekers in Rotherham, because they have the visuals of them confronting police and injuring police in Liverpool, in Hull, in Plymouth, in Bristol, they get a lot of coverage on mainstream media. And that intersects with the second factor, which is that social media is amplifying what they are doing. And in many cases, people on social media are not just excusing, but supporting what they're doing. And by the time we get to August 2nd, when Farage makes a second video to camera, again, this was for X, and he is then amplifying what he says in that video on his prime time. It's a polemical show. It's not a discussion show. It's his polemical show on this national TV station. Then we have fuel being put on the fire everywhere. And it's a real challenge for the government. And it's a real challenge for the courts and for police, which is you not only have to deal with the far right rioters, you've got to deal with a social media space and to an extent, a broadcast media space, which is contributing to the unrest.